It's been an incredibly rainy and gloomy day here today. It's just been pissing all day. And it's now like somewhere around 4 o'clock, I think, or 3 o'clock. And it's the first time today that it's been dry. So I thought that I'd come outside and I'd film this section out here so that I could get my daily dose of nature and outside time while also being productive and talking to you about my 1DX Mark II, finally, which I've owned for a month now. Also, as an aside, if today's movie looks different, it's because it's obviously not being filmed on the 1DX Mark II, but it's also not being filmed on my ADD, it's being filmed on my EOS R, which I have back and is fixed and actually records audio now. So that's why it's so like super mirrorless and crispy and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, I'm gonna go find a spot to sit and we'll talk about my pros and cons of this camera, which you can see is very well loved and used already in the month that I've owned it. Because I know she hasn't been in the vlog a lot recently. That's my dog Zelda. She's a Rhodesian Ridgeback Labrador and she's very cute. She loves cuddles. Anyway, let's talk about the pros of this camera first and then we'll talk about some of the cons that I've been experiencing. Obviously, the 1DX Mark II is an older camera. It came out in 2016 and as far as pro line bodies go, it's old now. And for me, it was between getting this or saving a little bit more money and getting a Canon R5. And I ended up choosing this specifically because of how rugged this body is. And like I've said it like 4 times already, but this thing has been through a lot already. Using this every single day has been an absolute treat. So, pros. The 1080p quality that comes out of this camera is absolutely insane. And the high ISO performance of this thing is also kind of insane. Being able to push this thing to 6400 ISO, 12800 ISO while recording video and still having not necessarily, you know, cinematic beautiful footage, but having it be usable is a feat in and of itself, and that has absolutely blown my mind. As for photo capabilities of gone, I use this for some astrophotography and I've used it for some high-speed photography as well. And just having a shutter that can do high-speed continuous, actually I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. This is what that looks like. No normal camera should be able to do that. Anyway, that's photography stuff. Not necessarily what I wanted to talk about, but still very, very interesting. I've been using this camera daily for 29 days now to shoot the daily vlogs, and in that time I've also been more motivated to take photos because this is also a great stills camera, and being able to put a 16-35, which I'm currently shooting this movie on this camera makes it infinitely better and more usable because glasses was going to improve an image quality far more than a new body would. Couple other things on the video front, for pros at least. The 1080-120 is buttery smooth and beautiful and sharp. Everything that comes out of this camera is crispy. It is. It comes out so sharp and so nice, and you can throw anything at this camera and it will look beautiful. And the form factor of it is also fantastic. The weight and the feel of this makes it so much easier to get smooth footage because you do just have so many more options for how you can actually hold the camera, because you can hold this camera from any angle. Makes it way easier to get quote-unquote cinematic footage. To conclude my pros list for this camera, I have thoroughly enjoyed it and I love using this camera. But there are a couple cons. Now, cons for this camera aren't super simple. It is a great camera, don't get me wrong, but let me be entirely clear with you. I bought this secondhand because it made sense for me within my price bracket to buy this camera secondhand. But that does mean one thing. This battery has been through a lot of recharges. In fact, this camera actually came with 2 batteries and one of them was completely kaput, just doesn't work. This battery doesn't hold charge very well, so I have to be quite conservative with how I am using this camera when I'm using it, which for a daily vlogger isn't ideal. It's a con in the sense that I can't get new batteries because the new Canon R3, who'd have guessed it, uses the same batteries, so they're sold out everywhere, so I can't actually get new ones, even though I do really, really want them. And I have a couple on back order at the moment, and I have no idea when they're gonna arrive. So that's con number 1. The battery life has been a bit of a struggle. I'm not sure if that's just the batteries because they're secondhand, or if that's the 1DX Mark II batteries in general. I'll see once I get that battery, but for now I just can't comment on that. Second con. This thing is hefty. Like there's no 2 ways about it. I picked up the EOS R before to film this on and suddenly realized that this camera is like 4 times heavier than it, which is great for trying to film cinematic footage, but as a daily vlogger, carrying this thing around is hard. It's a workout, and holding it out on a Joby tripod all the way out here with a 16-35 lens and a mic on top and a Joby tripod gets really, really, really heavy. And I've gotten a lot better at it as time's gone on, but there is no two ways around the fact that this camera is really heavy. One more con, the 4K crop is rough. It's not as cropped as it is on mirrorless EOS Rs, but it is there and it is noticeable. And I don't shoot 4K anyway, so it's not necessarily a con for me because I don't use it, but it is a con that I should mention regardless, because I know that there are going to be people out there that care about that. Those are kind of my pros and cons for having used this camera for about a month now. Let's talk about whether it's even worth getting a 1DX DSLR in 2022 and beyond. We all know that mirrorless cameras are the future, right? Like, that's something that we all just inherently understand, not only from a marketing perspective, but the things that mirrorless cameras can do now is just absurd. The shutter speeds, the high ISO capabilities, the battery life, just the form factor, the weight, everything about mirrorless cameras is objectively better, except for one thing, and that's price. The equivalent of the 1DX Mark II or Mark III is the Canon R3, and currently that mirrorless version of this flagship body is somewhere around the $8,000 mark. I got this camera for $3,000. That's not a small difference in price. That is over double. And the fact that I can own a flagship DSLR that was worth $10,000 when it released, not like a decade ago, but 6 years ago, when it released 8 years ago, the fact that I can get this for $7,000 cheaper is absurd. So for me, it made total sense that I would get this camera. Also from a nostalgia point of view, because when I started doing photography and videography, this is the camera that I dreamed about having. This is the camera that I saw in all of Peter McKinnon's videos, in Maddie Hapulya's videos, in Chris Howe's videos, in every YouTuber and every photographer and every videographer and filmmaker. They had this camera, and I drooled over it for years and years and years. And the fact that I was at a point that I could own this, and not only own it in a sense that, like, oh, I can have it for $10,000, but own it for a reasonable price point and still have a piece of kit that is so versatile and weatherproof and powerful for the same price as a beginner mirrorless setup. I don't know, maybe you think about it differently than I do, but this was such a logical decision for me that I literally didn't second guess it. The second I saw this online, I knew that I was getting this camera. So with that said, for me, this was totally worthwhile. This camera is beaten, battered, and bruised. I removed the mic port cover so that I could get my mic in and out quicker. I've used this thing heaps already, and I've loved every single second of it. But I think ultimately, it comes down to what you're looking for. If you're looking for the next step and the evolution of camera technology on the whole, then I think maybe jumping into mirrorless might be the best thing for you. But it also depends on what you're going to do with your gear. But I'm really happy with this, and I can't see myself upgrading for a very, very long time now that I do have this. So for me, and for where I'm at in my journey, and for what I'm doing in terms of using this camera every day in a way that pushes it to its limits, and it is being used for climbing filmmaking and extreme sports filmmaking in the future, and photography, and it's going to be put through its paces, it made sense for me to get a 1DX Mark II in 2022 and beyond. Might not be the case for you though. Anyway, that was a really, really long-winded way of me basically saying that I really enjoy using this camera. It was a great buy for me, and do your own research. Look into what you need, look into what you want out of a camera, and make your own decision. Yes, the 1DX Mark II is worth buying in 2022. No, it may not be the right decision for you and for what you want. There's so many options for cameras at the moment, and they all serve specific purposes. There is no one catch-all camera that is going to solve your needs. Maybe your perfect camera is a GoPro Hero 4 from 2009. That might be perfect for you. Or it might just be your phone. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. Speaking specifically about this though, yes, the 1DX Mark II is worth buying in 2022. That's it, I'm done. Camera rant over, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.